The afternoon sun casts long, indifferent rays over Westbrook Heights, a quiet, affluent neighborhood lined with oak trees, trimmed hedges, and the illusion of safety. But on this sidewalk, that illusion is about to shatter. A small crowd stands, frozen, some filming, others whispering. An older black woman clutches her grocery bags like a shield. A teenager's hand trembles as he holds up his phone. A jogger has stopped mid-stride, earbuds dangling, breath held. In the center of it all stands Elise Montgomery, 5'6", in a simple navy dress, wrists cuffed behind her back pressed against the hood of a police cruiser. Her long black braids, once neatly tied into a low bun, now dangle in ragged strands, half of them already on the ground. The pavement is littered with her identity. Officer Derek Slater, mid-30s, white, rigid with authority, grips a handful of her remaining braids in one gloved hand. In the other, a folding knife. He doesn't shout. He whispers, cold, deliberate. Let's see how important you feel without these. SFX, snap. The sound of blade meeting hair. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Someone mutters, "Oh my God." A teenage girl starts crying. Another braid falls like a severed vine, tumbling down Elise's shoulder, landing near the toe of her shoe. Beads roll across the sidewalk. The moment is too surreal for Elise to react. Her body remains frozen, but her breath hitches, involuntary. Her scalp stings, not just from the force, but from the sheer, soul-deep violation. These things are practically weapons anyway, Slater mutters for the onlookers' benefit. But then his voice drops low, just for her. Not so important now. Are you? She meets his eyes. And something shifts. Slater sees it. Something he didn't expect. Not fear, not panic, not rage, but control. Measured, focused, unbreaking. He doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know what he just started. And that will be his biggest mistake. A few feet away, a local grocer, Vincent Tucker, 50s, black, stands in his store's doorway. His phone is already recording. His eyes are hard. He recognizes Elise, knows exactly who she is, knows her husband, knows this won't end the way Slater thinks it will. He speaks under his breath, barely audible to himself. You picked the wrong damn woman. A camera goes off. Someone else records. The street is now a witness, and the internet will be the jury. But Slater ignores it. He reaches for another braid. Please don't do this, Elise says, her voice cracked but clear. He pretends not to hear. The blade touches her scalp again. Stop that right now, a voice shouts from behind. Mrs. Wilkins, 60s, Elise's neighbor across the street, barrels down her porch, phone in hand. That's assault. She ain't resisting. I got it all. On video! Slater turns briefly, annoyed. Ma'am, back away. Police matter. But it's too late. That brief distraction allows Elise to speak the sentence she's been holding back since the first time he asked for ID. My name is Elise Montgomery. Slater narrows his eyes. And? My husband is Mayor Marcus. Montgomery. A beat. His jaw tightens. Yeah? Well, he ain't here now. He finishes slicing the last braid. Elise shuts her eyes. Not from the pain, from the knowing. She knows what this moment is. This is no longer about a haircut. This is going to be a war. Elise Montgomery had always believed in structure. It calmed her. A structured day, a structured mind, a structured walk from the office to the pharmacy, then home. That's how peace was made. It was 3:47 p.m. when she stepped out of Parkside Pharmacy with a paper bag in her hand, filled with migraine medication and a small bottle of hand lotion she hadn't intended to buy. She paused outside the door and took a deep breath. Early autumn had begun to color the edges of the trees along Maple Avenue. The scent of late roses and distant chimney smoke mingled on the breeze. Her navy dress fluttered slightly as a car passed. She adjusted her purse strap over her shoulder, then began walking. "Have a good evening, Mrs. Montgomery," called Louise, the pharmacist. Elise turned and smiled. "Thanks, Louise. I'm hoping these new pills actually work." "They will, and if they don't, you come right back, all right?" "I will." There was something about being called Mrs. Montgomery in this part of town that still caught her off guard. She'd been Ms. Elise to clients, Elise to neighbors, Dr. Montgomery when people wanted to be formal, but the name Mrs. Montgomery had weight here. It came with a shadow attached, the kind cast by her husband's position. Marcus Montgomery, mayor of Westbrook City, and the first black man elected to that office. She loved him for many reasons, but his title wasn't one of them. In fact, she tried to forget it most days. As she walked, her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus' committee meeting running late. Dinner at 7, she smiled, tapped a quick reply. "Perfect. Pick up salmon on your way?" A thumbs-up emoji came back almost instantly. That was Marcus, efficient, brief, reliable. A man of action. Tonight, they'd planned a quiet evening. No guests, no speeches, no work. Just the two of them. A glass of wine, and maybe a movie they'd fall asleep watching. Elise tucked the phone back into her purse and walked on. Her neighborhood, Westbrook Heights, was one of those places where sidewalks were swept clean before. The leaves had a chance to fall. The houses were large, but not gaudy. Quiet wealth. The kind of place where people complained more about zoning laws than crime. She passed by Mrs. Grayson's garden and admired the dahlias, bright orange and deep red, heavy with bloom. Elise made a mental note to compliment her neighbor next. Time they met. Community mattered here. Or at least, it was supposed to. As the street transitioned from commercial to residential, she let her mind drift. 3 trauma patients had made real breakthroughs that day. One had opened up about a childhood memory for the first time in 6 months. Elise lived for moments like that. Change was slow, but it came. Just like the seasons. She rounded the corner onto Oakwood Drive. Her house was 2 blocks up. A colonial-style home with blue shutters and a wraparound porch. It wasn't the biggest house on the street, but it was the one with wind chimes that sang softly at night. Elise and Marcus had chosen it for that very reason. Serenity. The quiet was comforting. No sirens, no noise, just the occasional dog bark and the whisper of wind in the trees. Her headache had dulled. The walk had helped. She adjusted the bag in her hand and thought about dinner. Maybe roasted asparagus with the salmon. A lemon glaze? Something simple. Afterward, they could sit out back. She hadn't seen the stars in weeks, always too tired, too busy, or both. Her heels clicked gently on the pavement. She passed a house with a white picket fence and a swing, hanging from a tree. A little girl inside the yard waved at her through the iron bars. Elise waved back. She was already thinking about what book she'd finally start reading. Maybe the one Zoe Chen had recommended, when she heard it. The slow roll of tires behind her. She didn't think much of it at first. This was a neighborhood where police cruisers patrolled regularly, sometimes unnecessarily. Visible presence was part of the illusion of safety, but the sound didn't pass. It lingered, then slowed, then stopped. Elise glanced sideways, catching the edge of a black and white cruiser in her peripheral vision. She instinctively straightened her back, adjusted the bag in her hand, and kept walking. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it wasn't. The window rolled down with a mechanical hum. She stopped walking and turned toward the car, keeping her body relaxed, her voice calm. "Yes, officer?" The man inside was white, early to mid-30s, close-cropped hair under his cap, mirrored sunglasses despite the overcast light. His face was unreadable. "Evening, ma'am," he said, not unpleasantly. "Mind if I ask what you're doing in this neighborhood?" The words hit harder than they should have. Elise blinked. "I'm walking home," she replied carefully. "Do you live around here?" "I do. On Oakwood Drive, 2 blocks that way." She motioned with her head. He paused, still watching her. His name badge read, Slater. "I'll need to see some ID." There it was. The unease she had buried in routine began rising. She was a black woman in a white neighborhood. She was being asked for proof. Not a new story, just a different day. She reached into her purse slowly. "May I ask?" "Why?" she said as she did. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," he said vaguely. Elise's fingers found her wallet. She pulled it out and handed over her ID, all the while aware of his eyes studying her. Not just the name, but her face, her braids, her skin. Slater looked at the ID, then at her. "This address is out of date." "We moved last year," Elise said evenly. "Haven't updated it yet." She knew the risk in that lie, but she wasn't going to give him any more ammunition. Across the street, she saw Mrs. Wilkins standing at her gate, a watering can in one hand, her expression slowly shifting from neutral to alert. Elise gave her a small wave, grateful. The officer was still staring. "Ma'am," he said, "step away from the vehicle." Something in her chest tightened. "Excuse me?" "Step back from the vehicle, please." It had begun. Just another day in Westbrook. Until it wasn't. Elise stepped back from the cruiser just enough to comply. Not too fast, not too slow. Every move was measured. Every breath regulated. Her therapist instincts kicked in, but not as a healer, as a survivor. Her heart was pounding. Not loud, not yet, but steadily rising like water behind a dam. Officer Slater exited the car and stood. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered. His hand rested near his holster in a way that wasn't threatening, but wasn't relaxed either. "You said you live here," he said, glancing again at the ID. "But This says Southbridge. I told you, Elise said, keeping her tone neutral. We moved last year. I haven't updated the address. Uh-huh. His eyes flicked to the pharmacy bag. What's in the package? Medication, she said. For migraines. You can look at the label. He reached out. She hesitated only for a second. The weight of hesitation itself felt dangerous. Then extended the bag. He took it, turned it in his hand, studied the label like it might hold some secret. Sumatriptan, he read aloud. What's this for? Migraines, Elise said, for the second time. My pharmacist can confirm. He opened the bag, dug his fingers around inside. Her skin crawled. He was looking for something. Or pretending to. There's nothing illegal here, she said quietly. You're welcome to verify it with Parkside Pharmacy. I just left there. Slater didn't answer immediately. He handed the bag back with a faint smirk, like she'd failed some invisible test. And what brings you to this neighborhood specifically? I live here, she repeated. On Oakwood. My home is right over there, she pointed. 2 blocks away. A house with white railings and blue shutters and a red mailbox Marcus had painted himself. It seemed very far away now. Do you have proof of residence? I've given you my ID, she said, trying to sound patient, not defensive. I'm not carrying a utility bill. Slater nodded slowly, as if humoring her. He took a step closer. Across the street, Mrs. Wilkins had moved to her porch. She had her phone in her hand now, clearly watching, clearly recording. Elise was glad, and also ashamed to feel glad, that she needed witnesses, that she needed proof of her presence, her identity, her existence. You live here with who? Slater asked suddenly. My husband, she said, still withholding. She wasn't ready to pull that card. Not yet. Something in her refused. He around right now? No, she replied. He's at work. Slater nodded again, this time slower. What does he do? Elise paused. He works in city administration, she said vaguely. He raised an eyebrow. So you're some kind of government folks? I'm a clinical social worker, she said. Licensed. I have a private practice. Slater's expression didn't change, but his tone flattened. Oh, so you're a therapist. Yes. You help people with problems. That's one way to put it. People like drug addicts? Elise's heart gave a single hard beat. It wasn't a question. It was a shift. I work with trauma survivors, abuse, PTSD. Slater took another step forward, now only a few feet away. He circled slightly, glancing down the street. His posture was loose now, casual, like a man who had all the time in the world, like a man who believed he was already in control. You know, he said lightly, dealers often carry prescriptions like this. Makes them look legit. Gives them a reason to be where they shouldn't be. Elise felt her fingers twitch. She steadied her breath. Officer, she said slowly, I've cooperated with everything you've asked. I've explained my presence. I've identified myself. Unless you have reasonable suspicion I've committed a crime, I'd like to continue. Home. There. She'd said it. Not with aggression. Not with arrogance. Just with rights. Slater stopped pacing. He tilted his head, then took off his sunglasses for the first time. His pale blue eyes bore into hers. "How do you know terms like reasonable suspicion?" he asked, not kindly. "I work with legal education groups," she said. "We teach people about their rights in situations like this." That answer seemed to bother him more than it should have. "Well, I guess you know everything then," he said, stepping even closer. "Which means you know that if I feel threatened, or if I suspect criminal behavior, I'm allowed to investigate." "I'm not threatening you," Elise said, her voice firmer now. "I'm standing still. I'm answering questions. I'm holding a pharmacy bag." Slater's eyes darted to her purse. "You mind if I check your bag?" "I do mind," she replied. "Without probable cause, I don't consent to any search of my belongings." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, you're one of those." "One of what?" she asked. "People who think they know better than the police." "I think I know my rights," she replied. He took another half step. Now he was in her space, close enough she could smell the faint scent of his aftershave. "You're making this real difficult," he said, voice low. "You got something to hide?" "No," Elise said, steady. "But I have something to protect." "What's that?" "My dignity." The moment hung between them like a fuse. Then, from across the street, Mrs. Wilkins raised her voice. "She told you who she was. She gave you her ID. You got no reason to keep harassing her." Slater turned his head, shouted back, "Ma'am, stay out of this. It's a police matter." Elise seized the pause. "I live here," she said, louder this time. "I'm a licensed professional. I'm walking home from the pharmacy." "You're resisting cooperation," Slater snapped. "I'm exercising my rights." "That's the same damn thing in my experience." Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. This wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about control, power, proving a point. And that point was being made on her body, on her silence, on her restraint. Slater's radio crackled. A voice came through. "Dispatcher alerting to a suspicious person reported several blocks away." Similar description. He didn't respond. He didn't even glance at the radio. His eyes were locked on her. "That sounds a lot like you," he said, voice tight. "No, it doesn't," she replied. "You refusing to empty your pockets?" "Yes," Elise said. "I'm refusing an illegal search." Slater's nostrils flared. "Last chance to cooperate." "I've done nothing wrong." Stepped forward. "Turn around. Hands on the car." Elise didn't move. He barked it again. She froze. Across the street she heard someone say, "Call someone." Someone else. "Start filming now." A fence stood to her right. Sun glinted off its iron bars. Her mouth opened, but no words came. He grabbed her arm. This time, no more patience. No more pause. The calm had snapped, and so had something else. This was no longer a stop. It was the beginning of a storm. Elise's palms hit the hood of the patrol car, still warm from the sun. It wasn't the touch that startled her. It was the sound. Her hands made a soft slap against the metal, but in her ears it boomed like a gavel. Final. Decisive. Her body locked into position. Legs slightly apart, back straight, jaw clenched. Slater moved behind her like a man who had won something. "You're being detained on suspicion of narcotics possession with intent to distribute," he said in a low, almost bored voice, like he was reading off a checklist. "That's absurd," Elise said, the words cracking out of her throat. "Based on your behavior and the neighborhood complaints," he added. "What behavior?" she snapped. "Walking while black? Living while black? Carrying a legal prescription from a licensed pharmacy?" "Keep talking," Slater warned, leaning in close. "It's not helping your case." "This isn't a case," she replied through clenched teeth. "It's an assault." He didn't answer. Instead, he began patting her down. Rough, intentional, unjustified. She sucked in a breath as his hand jerked her purse off her shoulder. The strap caught in her braid, pulling sharply. She winced, but stayed silent. "You do not have consent to search that bag," she said, louder now. "This is an illegal search. I want your badge number and your supervisor's name." Slater ignored her, dug through the purse like he was tearing through trash. "I'm not resisting," Elise said. "For the witnesses. I'm not resisting." But his grip suddenly twisted her wrist. "You're hurting me," she gasped. "Stop resisting," he barked again, louder this time. "For show. I'm not—" Her words were cut off as he shoved her forward. The hood jolted her ribs. She cried out. Across the street, someone shouted, "She's not doing anything wrong!" Another voice, male, firm, closer, yelled, "I'm recording all of this." Slater spun toward the crowd. "Back off. This is a lawful detainment. Interfere, and you'll be arrested too." Elise felt her breath sputtering in and out. She fought to steady it. Not for his sake. For hers. Then she said it. "I'm Elise Montgomery. My husband is Mayor Marcus Montgomery." Slater's hands paused, just for a second. She couldn't see his face, but she felt the shift in his grip, a jolt of hesitation. Then his grip tightened again. "I don't care who your husband is," he muttered. "Should have thought about that before being difficult. You're violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You don't get to make demands," he growled. She felt him pull her arms behind her, too forcefully. Her shoulder twisted, a spike of pain lancing through it. "Stop resisting," he shouted again, even as she stood limp. Her braid, one long, thick strand, swung slightly from the motion. It brushed his cheek. That's all it took. That tiny, accidental touch was the spark. "You did not just hit me," he hissed. What? No, that was my hair. You just assaulted an officer." "Are you insane?" Elise cried. "It was my hair." She never got to finish. Slater slammed her back against the fence. The metal rattled, sharp and cold. Her head snapped back and struck the post. Stars exploded across her vision. Gasping, she tried to stay upright. Her scalp throbbed. Her wrists burned. Her dignity, already wounded, now began to crack. "Officer, please," she wheezed. "This is a mistake. I'm not—" "Shut up," Slater hissed, his face inches from hers. His breath was hot. His eyes were wild. "You assaulted a cop," he said. "That's a felony. You're done." He leaned even closer. "You and your fancy braids. Think you're special? Think you're above the rules? That word, braids, landed differently. She felt it in her stomach. The contempt wasn't just for her presence. It wasn't just racial. It wasn't just professional. It was personal. "You want to assault officers with your hair?" he muttered. And then, with sudden quiet deliberation, he reached to his belt. Elise thought he was going for his radio, or worse, his weapon. Instead, he pulled out something smaller, a folding blade, black handle, quick release. "What are you doing?" she said, a note of disbelief rising in her voice. "These are a safety issue," he said loudly, for the crowd. But then he leaned in and whispered directly in her ear, "Let's see how important you feel without them." "No," Elise breathed. "No, don't you dare." But he did. He grabbed a fistful of her braids, tight, near the scalp. She could feel the roots pull. The blade touched her hair. "Please," she whispered, a lump forming in her throat. "Don't do this." The first cut came without warning, a harsh, sawing noise, metal against strands of pride, of identity, of self. Snick, saw, pull, drop. The braid fell, heavy, final. It hit the pavement like a verdict. Gasps exploded from the crowd. Someone screamed. Someone cried out her name. But Elise didn't move. She stood still, the only thing she could do. Her muscles burned. Her breath hitched. Her eyes filled. But she wouldn't let the tears fall. "Not here. Not for him. This is more than assault," she whispered, so low only the wind heard it. "This is degradation." Slater grabbed another braid. Her scalp stung. Her knees threatened to give out, and still she stayed quiet, steady, strong. She memorized the moment, not just the pain, but everything. The cold of the blade, the heat of her humiliation, the sharp smell of sweat and blood and fear. She burned it into her memory, like evidence. He sliced again. "This is Officer Safety Protocol," Slater announced to the growing crowd. "It's a hate crime," someone yelled. "You're gonna lose your badge for this," another shouted. But Slater kept going. She felt the last braid fall, and with it, a part of herself. And yet, at the center of the storm, Elise remained whole. Because she knew something Slater didn't. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of his. The sound of her hair hitting the pavement echoed louder than it should have. It shouldn't have made a sound at all. But it did. A soft thud, like something sacred being dropped. Elise stood motionless, frozen not by fear anymore, but by fury so deep it carved silence around her. Her body remained still, but inside her a fire had been lit, a fire that would not go out. Behind her, Slater wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, the blade now smeared with hair and strands of string beads. He'd gone too far, and he knew it. His breathing was heavier, his eyes darting around now, scanning the witnesses that had multiplied. Across the street, Mrs. Wilkins was no longer just standing at her gate. She was on her front lawn, phone raised, tears brimming behind her thick. "Glasses! That's enough!" she cried out, voice trembling but fierce. "She's not fighting you. She's not a threat. More phones had appeared. One from the corner porch, two from passing joggers. A man named Vincent Tucker, owner of the small grocery store at the end of the block, stood on the curb. He hadn't planned on stopping, but he had. And now his phone was up too. "What the hell are you doing?" Vincent called out. "That's assault, man! I'm filming this!" Slater turned, flashing his badge at them like a shield. "Back off. This is police business." "You don't get to cut off someone's hair," someone else said. A woman in medical scrubs stepping out of a parked car. "That's not procedure. That's not even remotely okay." "I said, back off," Slater shouted, pulling himself up to full height. His hand hovered over his gun, not quite drawing it, but close enough to make everyone take a step back. Elise didn't flinch. She couldn't, because flinching would be defeat, and she hadn't come this far to fall now. I am Elise Montgomery," she said loudly, turning her head just enough for her voice to carry. "I am the wife of Mayor Marcus Montgomery." Gasps rippled through the air. Slater froze, the blade in his hand still open. For the first time since the encounter began, he looked unsure. "I want a lawyer," she continued, her voice now louder, steadier, clearer. "I want your supervisor here, and I want every second of this documented." Behind them, someone yelled out, "He's the mayor's wife? What the hell is this?" Slater took a half step back. His hands still trembled slightly. He looked at the camera lenses. All of them pointed directly at him. He didn't speak. The moment cracked open, and the balance of power shifted. Just a little. But enough. "You messed up, officer," said Vincent Tucker, stepping closer. "She gave you her ID. She cooperated. We all saw it. Go back." "Inside!" Slater barked. "No," Vincent replied. "We're staying right here." Slater looked at Elise again. He was breathing faster now. His posture, once proud, now looked defensive. The narrative he thought he controlled was slipping from his hands. And Elise, she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't just a victim. She was a voice, a witness, a name. And now everyone knew it. Mrs. Wilkins shouted, "I'm calling 911 for a supervisor." Slater grabbed Elise's arm. "You don't get to run this," he hissed. Elise didn't even turn. "You already lost it." Suddenly, Slater's radio crackled again, this time louder. Dispatch confirmed that another officer was en route to support a high-visibility civilian incident involving community disturbance and a possible breach of protocol. He didn't respond, because what could he say? His authority had become a spotlight, and the town was watching. "I didn't do anything wrong," Elise said, loud enough now for every phone to pick it up. "I walked home from the pharmacy. I gave you my ID. I answered every question." "Stop talking," Slater warned, but she didn't. "I said I live here, and you cut off my hair. You degraded me in public. You used your badge as a weapon." Her voice cracked, just once, but she kept going. "You don't get to silence me." A girl no older than 15 stood on a neighbor's porch, phone shaking in her hands, her eyes wide, her mouth open. A little boy peeked from behind a door frame, confused but curious. They were watching too. They were learning something. Slater stepped back from Elise, suddenly aware of how many lenses were fixed on him. How many angles were catching this moment? He folded the knife with a click that sounded too loud, too final. "You made this difficult," he muttered. "That's all." Elise turned, slowly, with dignity, and faced him, her face streaked with sweat, but her eyes hard. "No," she said. "You did." For a brief second, they stood there. Two people, two forces, two futures colliding. And then the sound of a second patrol car arriving broke the tension. The vehicle pulled up fast. Another officer stepped out. Female, Hispanic, uniform pristine, expression unreadable. Her nameplate read, Sergeant M. Alvarez. She took one look at Elise, the uneven hair, the bruised wrists, the crowd. Then she turned to Slater. "What's going on here, Officer Slater?" Before he could answer, Elise raised her voice again. "I would like to file a formal complaint. Right now." Alvarez blinked, then nodded. "Let's get you medical first. Then we'll do this by the book." Slater's jaw tensed, but he said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The witnesses had spoken, and the silence of power had finally been broken. The room was bright, too bright. Inside the precinct's intake area, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel sterile and unreal. Elise sat on a hard plastic chair, her wrists red and swollen, her scalp still stinging with every movement. She hadn't spoken in the car. She didn't need to. Her silence had done more damage than her words could have. Across from her, Sergeant Alvarez typed rapidly into a report terminal, pausing occasionally to glance at Elise with a tight-lipped expression of concern, but not yet alliance. Slater, by contrast, was nowhere in sight. He had peeled off the moment they arrived, disappearing into a side door with a dismissive wave and a mumbled, "Handled, handled." Elise closed her eyes, fists clenched. The words scraped across her mind like broken glass. The station was filled with noise. Dispatch calls, ringing phones, murmured jokes between uniforms who had no idea what had just arrived at their doorstep. Or worse. Maybe they did. "But depends. I get you water?" Alvarez asked. "No," Elise said softly. "I want this documented. Photographs, statements. I want every protocol followed. You'll need medical." "Document first," Elise repeated. Alvarez paused, then nodded, signaling for another officer. Soon, a female officer entered the room. Younger, clearly nervous, with a camera and clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," she said awkwardly, "we're going to need to take pictures of everything." Elise nodded once and began unbuttoning the collar of her blouse to reveal the bruises on her neck, her shoulders. The room fell silent as the shutter began to click. Each flash, snap, 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 became a record, a scar frozen in time. They took photos of her hair, the jagged cuts, the missing braids, the small blood-tinged patches on her scalp. When the photographer stepped away, Elise felt herself breathe. Not easier, but more solidly. Like standing on broken ground that she had finally named. Then came the voice behind the door. Where is she? It was Marcus, the mayor of the city. The husband whose name had once felt too heavy to speak. Now it thundered through the hall like justice with footsteps. The door burst open. Marcus Montgomery stood at the threshold, in a tailored navy blue suit, necktie half loosened, face ghost white with barely concealed fury. His eyes landed on Elise, and everything else disappeared. "Elise," he breathed. She looked at him, and for a moment the room blurred. He crossed to her quickly, dropping to his knees, his hand gently brushing the uneven stubble where her braids had been. "My God," he whispered. "What did they do to you?" "I told them I didn't want special treatment," she said, voice flat. "They gave me something worse." Marcus looked up, eyes blazing. "Where's the officer who did this?" "He's still here," Alvarez said carefully. "I've notified the captain." "Has he been disarmed?" There was a pause. "Has he even been suspended?" Marcus barked. "Administrative review," someone muttered. "That's not accountability," Marcus snapped. "That's delay. That's how they bury things." Elise didn't react. She had moved beyond anger, beyond even shock. She was somewhere else now, someplace steel-hard and cold, where survival demanded clarity. "Marcus," she said quietly, "don't let them apologize and move on. Don't let them call it a misunderstanding." Her words were a whisper, but her husband heard them like thunder. "I won't," he promised. The precinct's captain, Reynolds, appeared moments later, his face grim as though walking into a funeral. "Mr. Mayor," he began, extending a hand. Marcus ignored it. "We need a private room," Elise said, "for a formal statement, and I want video documentation." Reynolds blinked. "Of course," the captain turned to Alvarez. "Get internal affairs on the line, now." Then, looking at Elise, he said softly, "I'm so sorry this happened." Elise didn't respond, because she knew what would happen next. The spin, the story that would be told, the attempts to minimize it. She was emotional. She resisted. There was confusion. Officer safety. She could hear it already, not from Reynolds, maybe, but from the structure around him, from the unions, the defenders, the shield of silence. Marcus crouched beside her again. "This can go away quietly," he said carefully, "if you want it to." She turned her face toward him. Her eyes were glassy but steady. "No," she said. "It doesn't go away. Not this time." Marcus exhaled slowly. "It's going to get ugly." "It already is ugly," Elise replied. "Now the city should see what ugly looks like." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus nodded. "Okay," he said. "Then we go public." The first statement from the department came just past midnight, a PDF attachment to a short press release. Clinical, cold, and infuriatingly vague. Earlier today, a civilian female was briefly detained during a standard neighborhood patrol in Westbrook Heights. The responding officer believed the individual matched the description from an earlier call regarding suspicious activity. The subject was released without charge. An internal review is underway. No mention of the hair. No mention of the bruises. No mention of Elise's name. Just a civilian female, like she didn't exist. Like she was a shadow, a silhouette. Marcus threw his phone across the bed. It bounced off the comforter and landed face down on the floor. "They're already washing it," he said, running a hand through his hair. They're erasing it in real time. Elise sat on the edge of the bed in silence. She hadn't said much since they got home. Her hair, what was left of it, was tied back loosely, uneven. She wore one of Marcus's sweatshirts and stared at the press release on her tablet like it was a live threat. "They didn't even say it was me," she whispered. "That's not an accident." "And they called it a detainment," she continued, her voice rising slightly. "No mention of excessive force, of assault, of humiliation. Not even a damn apology." Marcus sighed. "They're buying time, positioning. They're positioning me as the problem." His phone buzzed again. Incoming messages from the chief of staff, the city attorney, 2 council members, 1 national news outlet. They all wanted a statement. Some wanted him to stay silent. Some wanted him to protect the department. None wanted the truth, as Elise lived it. "It's already happening," Marcus muttered. "They're circling the wagons." Elise stood and walked to the mirror. She took a deep breath and pulled off the hair tie, letting the uneven remnants of her braids fall loose. She stared at herself, at the damage. She had always worn her hair with pride, each braid a declaration of self, of heritage, of care. Now they were jagged, torn, visibly butchered. "I want this image burned into the city's memory," she said. "I want them to see what was done. To me. Not a statement, not a rumor. Me." Marcus looked up. "Then we hold a press conference." Elise turned. "Not at City Hall, not in front of flags and marble." He blinked. She continued. "The community center. The same one where we held that seminar on policing and mental health last fall. Where the people who'll actually care can hear the truth." Marcus hesitated. "You know this could derail everything we've built politically. The unions, the moderates. I was assaulted, Marcus." He closed his eyes. "I know. And if you try to protect the system before you protect me, we're going to have a different problem." There it was, the marriage on the line, the values they shared cracking under the weight of real consequence. "I'll set it up," Marcus said softly. "Tomorrow." But even as he said it, he could feel the tremor beneath the decision, the pressure building. The city he ran was starting to look at him like a traitor. The department was already whispering. The press would be calling by morning, and worst of all, the police union had already begun its own plan. Across town, at a modest brick building with a large blue emblem above the doorway, Police Union Representative Mike Donovan slammed a thick folder down on the table. "Here's what we do," he said. 6 officers, including Slater's precinct sergeant and 2 union lawyers, looked up from their seats. "She's the mayor's wife," one said cautiously. "We can't just ignore that." "We don't ignore it," Donovan replied. "We reframe it." He tapped the folder. "We call her behavior erratic. We mention previous complaints from Slater. Even if they were dismissed, we raise doubts. We don't attack. We insinuate. Soft language. Let the public fill in the blanks." "She's not some random woman," another officer argued. "She's respected, high profile." "Exactly," Donovan said. "Which is why we start early. We don't try to win the truth. We win the narrative." He turned to Slater, who sat stiffly in a corner of the room, still in uniform, hands clenched. "We'll protect you," Donovan promised. "But you have to stick to the script." Slater looked up. I did everything by protocol. That's what we'll say, Donovan agreed. Officer safety, split-second decisions, non-compliant suspect. Keep it gray. But I cut her hair. Then you say it was entangling your equipment. Officer safety? Again. It wasn't. Donovan gave a slow smile. Doesn't matter. The next morning, Elise scrolled through her inbox as she sipped her tea, hands still trembling slightly. The top subject lines stung. Breaking. Allegations against Officer Spark, citywide debate. Mayor's wife claims hair was cut. Police say no misconduct. Sources. Officer claims victim was aggressive, uncooperative. Body cam. Footage inconclusive. Union demands fair hearing. Inconclusive. Uncooperative. Claimed. The language was working exactly as designed. She set the tablet down and looked out the window. Across the street, Vincent Tucker stood outside his shop, looking back toward her home. Their eyes met. He raised, his hand in a small wave. Not a hello, a kind of silent promise. We saw. We remember. We're not letting it go. Elise nodded back. Tomorrow would bring cameras, questions, outrage. She would be made into a symbol, a case, a controversy. But today, she was just Elise, the woman who'd survived a knife, a badge, and a system that preferred silence. The podium at the Westbrook Community Center was older than most of the buildings surrounding it. It had hosted voter drives, health awareness seminars, neighborhood cook-offs, and school supply giveaways, but it had never, not once, held a moment like this. Elise stood behind it, her hands gripping both sides as if the wood itself was anchoring her to the earth. Cameras blinked like 100 tiny eyes. The local press was present, as expected, but so was CNN, MSNBC. Even a reporter from the Washington Post hovered near the edge of the crowd, notebook ready. She wore a navy blazer over a white blouse. Her remaining braids were gone now, shaved clean. Her natural hair, cropped close, framed her face like a crown of resistance. She hadn't chosen this look, but now she owned it. Marcus sat in the second row, deliberately not the first. His presence was quiet but visible, supportive but not dominant. Elise had insisted this would not be about the mayor. This was about the woman the officer didn't recognize, about the woman the system had tried to erase, about every black woman who had been silenced, overlooked, humiliated, and told to be grateful it wasn't worse. Elise stepped up to the mic. She didn't smile. She didn't thank anyone for coming. She didn't ease into it. She looked into the cameras and said, "I'm not here as the mayor's wife. I'm here as Elise Montgomery, a licensed clinical social worker, a trauma counselor, and a citizen of this city. I was stopped on my walk home. I complied. I identified myself. I answered every question, and I was assaulted, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. My hair, a part of my identity, was cut off by a police officer while I was handcuffed. Gasps rippled across the room. Some were quiet. Some were from people hearing the full details for the first time. Others were not surprised, but still deeply shaken by the confirmation. Elise continued, "There is video. There are witnesses. But even with all of that, I have been painted as non-compliant, as aggressive, as a problem." She paused. Let the weight settle. Then, if this is how the system treats someone with a public profile, a legal background, and the full support of the mayor's office, imagine how it treats those with none of those protections. Imagine how many voices were never heard because there were no cameras, no witnesses, no husbands in power. Some people in the crowd began to cry. Others clapped softly, but Elise wasn't done. This is not about one officer. This is about the culture that protects him, that trains officers to view black bodies as threats, that teaches compliance is more important than dignity, that considers cutting a black woman's hair a minor offense, not an act of racial and gendered violence. Now the room was completely still. Even the journalists had stopped writing. I don't want a private apology. I want public accountability. I don't want this swept under another investigation that ends in silence. I want reform. I want policy. I want action. She took a slow breath, then delivered the final blow. Because if it takes being the mayor's wife to make people care, then this city doesn't need a mayor. It needs a mirror. The silence held. No applause yet, just the heavy weight of truth sitting in the chest of every person listening. Then the room erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was release. The kind of applause that came from pent-up fury, from long-held grief, from the truth that had, for once, been spoken out loud and without apology. Marcus stood, not to steal attention, but because he couldn't remain seated. Their eyes met for a second. He nodded once, a gesture not just of pride, but of recognition. You were right. You were brave. This is your fight. Outside, the press conference trended before it even ended. Elise Montgomery, her hair, her voice. Say her name. Officer Slater. The hashtags bounced across timelines like gunshots. Civil rights groups released statements of support. Feminist collectives posted collages of black women's hair, calling it a sacred inheritance, not a police target. But not all reactions were supportive. Conservative outlets released headlines like, "Mayor's wife weaponizes hair for political gain. Did she refuse orders before the haircut? Police say officer followed safety protocol." The union released their own footage, cropped, silent body cam clips, conveniently missing the haircutting, conveniently ending just before Elise's name was spoken. They claimed the footage was incomplete due to technical issues. But Elise knew better. Everyone knew better. That night, Elise lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her words had reached thousands, maybe millions, and yet she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that physical assault alone couldn't explain. Marcus turned toward her. "You changed something today." She didn't answer at first. Then, finally, "I poked a hornet's nest." He reached for her hand. "You opened a wound that needed air. That's different." But they both knew. The worst wasn't over. There would be retaliation. There would be personal attacks. There would be betrayal. The truth had gone public. And now the system would fight back. It started with a headline: Mayor's wife lied about officer's actions, says police union. Then came the talk radio segment. She says her braids were cut as an act of violence. But the footage is inconclusive. It's a political stunt. If she wasn't the mayor's wife, would we even care? And then the threats. Hundreds of them. Some subtle. You better be careful walking alone again. Some explicit. We know where you live. You don't speak for us. And some coated with rage only women, especially black women, could recognize. You don't look so high and mighty without your hair? Elise read each one at first. Then she stopped. Then Marcus had her security detail increase patrols. Then the private security firm doubled it, but no locks could keep out what came next. In a hushed city council meeting, 2 members withdrew support for the proposed police accountability package Marcus had been crafting for years. Now isn't the right time, one said. Let the internal investigation play out, another offered. Privately, one admitted to Marcus, I have 3 officers in my district threatening to quit if we don't defend Slater. If I back Elise, I lose re-election. Marcus wanted to shout. He wanted to slam his fist into the table and remind them what had been done to his wife. Not just the physical harm, but the humiliation. But he didn't, because he knew. In this town, yelling made you unstable, especially if you were black, especially if you were in charge. The next blow came at night. Elise was brushing her teeth when Marcus appeared in the bathroom doorway, pale and shaken. Elise, he said, his voice tight. You need to see this. He handed her the tablet. A leaked personnel file, hers, was circulating online. Anonymous Twitter accounts posted her college disciplinary warning for protesting a speaker, a sealed lawsuit from a patient who'd accused her of professional bias, and even surveillance screenshots from her walk home. Not exactly an upstanding citizen, one post read. No wonder she was acting suspicious. You can take her out of the hood, but Elise didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, they want to turn me into the stereotype. Angry, aggressive, unhinged. Marcus sat beside her. You are none of those things, she nodded. But they don't need me to be them. They just need people to wonder. The city's white, moderate voices, the ones Elise had always tried to meet halfway in her therapy work and activism, began to fade into silence. Clergy leaders canceled statements they had previously promised to make. A progressive podcast that had invited her to speak suddenly went in a different direction. A community mental health coalition quietly removed her from their advisory board. Elise was becoming radioactive, not because she was wrong, but because she was loud. She had not just spoken truth, she had demanded action. And now, even her allies were shrinking away to protect their own standing. One afternoon, Vincent Tucker walked into her living room holding a USB drive. Elise blinked. What is it? Footage, he said quietly. From the corner store. The whole thing, start to finish. I backed it up before they even asked. She took the drive like it was a sacred object. Thank you, she said, but Vincent didn't smile. They came by again. 2 officers, plain clothes. Told me there's a code violation on my outdoor signage. Threatened to report me to zoning, enforcement. Jesus, Vincent nodded. I'm not scared for me, but the pressure's real. They're playing dirty. Elise's grip tightened around the drive. They think we'll break. Most people would. I'm not most. People. That night, Marcus called a meeting with his communications team. I want a full press response, he said. We release the full video. We show every second, even the braid hitting Slater's cheek. Everything. One of his advisors shook. Their head. That's risky. It reopens the narrative. We've finally calmed some of the backlash. If we reignite it, she's my wife, Marcus growled. She's also becoming a political liability, another whispered. Silence fell. Then Marcus rose. I didn't marry Elise because she was convenient, he said. I married her because she's right. If that makes me a one-term mayor, so be it. But even as he spoke the words, even as he meant them, he knew the fight wasn't over. The council was cracking. The police commissioner was silent. And the union was preparing a statement of its own. Elise stood by the window that night, watching the neighborhood. 2 cars had circled her block in the last hour. One parked down the street with its lights off. The officer assigned to her private security leaned against a tree across the road, alert, calm, but young. Do you ever feel like they're all waiting for me to snap? Elise asked quietly, without turning around. Marcus stepped beside her. They want you angry. They want you to fall apart so they can say, see, she was never stable, never credible. I won't give them that. No, Marcus said. You'll give them something worse. What? He turned to her with tired eyes and a small, pained smile. Grace. It was quiet when the file was uploaded. No press conference, no dramatic countdown, no spinning siren across the screen, just a plain black screen. Then, a title in white block letters. Full unedited footage. Incident, Elise Montgomery and Officer Derek Slater, September 12th. Courtesy of Tucker Market Security Cameras, Angle 1, and then the truth began to roll. No cuts, no edits, no union-approved sound bites, just pure, silent, damning reality. First, Elise walking down the sidewalk, calm, composed, bag in one hand, purse on her shoulder. Then Slater's patrol car slowing beside her. The conversation wasn't heard, but Elise's posture told enough. She stopped, nodded, handed something over. Then he got out. Then the demand. The gesture to her purse. Then the escalation. Her back stiffened. She stepped back. He stepped forward. She raised both hands, clearly speaking calmly. Slater's hand moved to his belt. She submitted, turned around. He patted her down, roughly. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a blade. He reached up and, while she was handcuffed, gripped her braids and began sawing. Slow, deliberate, vicious. And when the first locks fell to the pavement, Elise jerked, not resisting, but clearly breaking. At the bottom corner of the video, the timestamp kept ticking forward. No interference, no aggression from Elise, only Slater's escalating cruelty. And finally, he held the braids up like a trophy before discarding them on the sidewalk. Within 30 minutes of upload, The video had been viewed 200,000 times. By the end of the day, 3.1 million comment sections filled faster than moderators could monitor. This is disgusting. How did this ever happen in broad daylight? This is a hate crime. Fire. Arrest. Prosecute. On Twitter, Janus Officer Slater was trending. But so was something new. Justice for Elise media coverage shifted rapidly. One prominent anchor, who had earlier called Elise provocative, now led her segment with tears in her voice. I watched the entire footage twice. I didn't see a threat. I saw power. And then I saw it abused. Even more damning, former defenders began defecting. One council member who had refused to support Marcus's reform bill now posted, I was wrong. I saw the footage. This wasn't an error. It was assault. I'm co-sponsoring the bill. Trianry, a small apartment on the city's north end, Derek Slater sat alone. The sound was off, but he recognized the footage playing on his TV. He knew the exact moment it was filmed. He remembered the feel of the braids in his hand, the tension as the who. Blade met resistance. At the time, he'd felt righteous, like he was restoring order to someone who'd acted out. Now, his own face on the screen made him want to crawl out of his skin. The worst part wasn't the footage. It was the silence from the department. The union that had promised to protect him, now sending no comment press releases. His lawyer, not returning texts. His wife, still gone. She'd left days ago with their kids. Said she needed space. He opened his inbox and scrolled through the hate mail. But the worst message was from his own father. What you did isn't what I taught you to do in that uniform. Slater closed the laptop and pressed his face into his hands. For the first time, he whispered it aloud. I went too far. Back at City Hall, the mayor's office buzzed like a campaign war room. Journalists called non-stop. Council members demanded meetings. Civil rights attorneys offered partnership. Public figures, black athletes, artists, even a few celebrities, began tagging Elise by name, offering support, asking how to help. Inside the mayor's office, Marcus stood before his team. We have to act now, tonight. I want a press release, a full apology from the city, and an emergency session of council called for Friday. We're not hiding behind review boards anymore. But the commissioner, I don't care. He wants to protect the old system. Let him, his chief of staff leaned in. The votes for the accountability bill? They're moving. Fast. Elise didn't hold another press conference that day. She didn't need to. The video had spoken. The city had seen. Instead, she sat quietly in her office, door closed, phone off. She watched the footage once, just once. Then she wept. Not because of the trauma, but because it was finally visible. Because the thing they had tried to erase, the pain, the humiliation, the small violence against her body and dignity, had been preserved, shared, believed. Later, that night, Marcus came home and found Elise standing outside, barefoot in the grass, arms folded. They saw, she said quietly. They did. Do you think it changes anything? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He stood beside her, looking out at the quiet street where this all began. No, he said. I think you did. She turned to him. It's not over. No, he agreed. But now, it's not just your fight. They looked out at the neighborhood together, the sidewalks, the porches, the spot where Slater first stopped her. And for the first time in weeks, it felt less haunted, a little less silent. It was 8 a.m. sharp when the mayor's official press conference began. Flanked by legal advisors, civil rights leaders, and 3 city council members, Marcus Montgomery stepped up to the podium, not as a husband, but as the mayor and for the first time in his career, he did not mince a single word. The footage released yesterday is clear and conclusive. Officer Derek Slater's actions were not just inappropriate. They were criminal. Effective immediately, he is suspended without pay, pending a full misconduct hearing. But this is not just about one officer. It is about a culture, a protocol, a system that allowed this to happen. And I am done waiting for permission to fix it. The crowd was stunned. The mayor, long seen as cautious and politically centrist, had just declared open war on the very department he oversaw. He continued, "Today I'm introducing the POI, Civilian Accountability Package, a new oversight board, a public misconduct registry, mandatory body cam policy with independent storage access, no more internal investigations behind closed doors." One reporter raised a hand. "Mayor Montgomery, are you saying your own administration failed to prevent this?" Marcus looked into the camera. "Yes, and that ends today." Back inside the department, Police Commissioner Walsh sat in his office, watching the live feed. His jaw tightened. "Damn it, Marcus," he muttered. "You're throwing gasoline on the whole department." Across his desk, a representative from the police union folded his arms. Slater followed protocol. "No, he followed impulse," Walsh said. "And now we all look like accomplices." You suspend him without arbitration. You break the contract. You want me to keep him on duty after that footage? You open the floodgates. You set a precedent. Every officer's every move will be called into question. Walsh stood. Maybe that's the point. Elise didn't attend the press conference. She watched it from her office, seated beside Zoe Chen and Vincent Tucker. Zoe had paused the clip 3 times, first when Marcus named Officer Slater, then when he admitted systemic failure, and finally, when he listed the reforms. "This isn't just performative," Zoe whispered. "He's going all in." Vincent leaned forward. "So what happens now?" Elise was silent for a long moment. Then she replied, "Now, they come after all of us." The pushback came faster than expected. The police union filed an injunction within 48 hours to block Slater's suspension. Conservative media exploded with headlines. "Mayor attacks law enforcement to appease his wife." Civilian oversight bill is a war on police. Officer Slater deserves due process. Protests formed on both sides. One side chanted her name. The other carried signs that read, "We stand with Slater, and don't let her tear down the force." Elise's office received a handwritten note. "Keep pushing, and next time it won't be your hair." That evening, Marcus returned home late. Elise was on the porch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the tree-lined street. He sat beside her. "I don't know if I can hold the center," he admitted. The department's cracking. Union leaders are threatening mass sick-outs, resignations. They say I betrayed them. You did, Elise said quietly. He looked at her, startled. You betrayed the part of them that believes power should never be questioned. That part needed to be betrayed, she paused. You finally chose a side. That always has a cost. Meanwhile, inside a dimly lit Union Hall, Officer Slater sat with his lawyer and a half-dozen die-hard supporters. He looked older, his face drawn, his eyes bloodshot. They've suspended you. Unpaid, Donovan, the union rep said. We're filing for arbitration, but it's going to take time. Slater leaned forward. They're going to make an example of me. Donovan didn't argue. One officer, a younger man Slater barely knew, spoke up. You shouldn't have cut her hair, man. That wasn't protocol. That was personal. Slater's voice cracked. You weren't there. She challenged me. Smiled, like she knew I couldn't do anything to her. Like she was better than me. Because she was, another muttered, standing up and leaving the room. Silence followed. Slater felt it. The beginning of abandonment. Even the brotherhood had limits. Back in Westbrook Heights, Elise was visited by a city official. An older, black woman, elegant and quiet-spoken, she held a manila folder. I came here when I heard what you were doing. I used to file complaints, years ago, about this same officer. All dismissed, all buried. She handed Elise the folder. These are copies of the letters. You'll see the pattern. Elise opened the first. Subject: Officer Derek Slater, excessive force complaint, 2016. There were 4 more. Elise's hands trembled. They buried all of this. The woman nodded. Until you. No one had the power to dig them back up. In the mayor's office, Marcus received a call from Washington. Senator, I saw your reforms. Impressive, brave, dangerous. Dangerous for who? For your re-election, the senator said with a chuckle. But maybe not for your conscience. That night, Elise sat alone in her office reviewing the evidence, the footage, the complaints, the statements from other victims coming forward. She thought of every black woman who had been taught to be small, to be safe, to be silent. She closed her laptop and whispered to herself, not anymore. The hearing chamber was smaller than Elise expected. No grand marble pillars, no sweeping stage, just a circular layout of 5 civilian board members seated at a semicircle table. Their expressions solemn, their eyes fixed on her. Cameras had been permitted by unanimous vote, not because it was expected, but because it was demanded. The public had watched her assault. They deserved to watch her truth. A clerk read the case title aloud. Montgomery versus Officer Derek Slater. Formal misconduct. Hearing. The chairwoman, a retired judge named Clara Winslow, turned to Elise. Mrs. Montgomery, you may proceed. Elise stood. She didn't look at her notes. She didn't need to. She looked up. Not at the board, but directly into the cameras. And, she began, I've been asked to recount what happened to me. But this isn't just about me. It's about a system. One that sees confidence in a black woman as aggression. That sees dignity as defiance. That sees hair, our hair, as a threat. Gasps could be heard from the public section. But Elise pressed on. I was detained without cause, handcuffed, then humiliated. My braids, symbols of my culture, my history, my identity, were cut off with a knife by a police officer. Not in defense, not by accident, but as punishment for not being afraid. She stepped forward. But here's the part that still haunts me. It wasn't just Slater. It was the system that trained him, the supervisors that ignored complaints, the union that covered for him, the silence of his colleagues who saw and said nothing. Her voice caught. And it wasn't just about me. I am the mayor's wife, a licensed therapist, a public figure. But I keep thinking about the woman who isn't, who didn't have a crowd watching, who didn't have a husband in power, who couldn't record the moment she was stripped of her dignity. If this happened to me, how many others has it happened to without consequence? Silence blanketed the room. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. She stepped back, nodded to the board, and sat down. No one clapped, but no one moved either, because something sacred had just been said. From a bench in the back of the room, Slater watched it all. His lawyer had advised him not to speak. Not today, but no silence could protect him now. The video had already done the talking. Elise's testimony was just the verdict before the verdict. For the first time, Slater didn't look angry. He looked small. Across the city, people stopped what they were doing to watch. At a school cafeteria, a group of black teenage girls stood in front of the wall-mounted TV in silence. One of them whispered, "She said what we all feel." At a barber shop, a father turned to his son and said, "That's why I teach you to know your rights." At a city park, a group of older men who'd grown up in the civil rights era watched Elise with tears in their eyes. "She's one of us now," one said. "She's leading something bigger." After the hearing, Zoe and Vincent joined Elise on the courthouse steps. Reporters flooded the scene. "Mrs. Montgomery, do you want Officer Slater fired?" Elise didn't flinch. "I want him held accountable. But more than that, I want the system that empowered him reformed. If we only remove the man, but leave the structure, nothing changes." Another reporter. "Do you believe race was a factor?" She locked eyes with him. "I believe race is always a factor." The question isn't whether bias played a role. The question is why we keep pretending it doesn't. That night, Mayor Marcus Montgomery called an emergency session. The civilian accountability package, which had stalled 2 weeks earlier, was back on the table. This time, with momentum, protesters filled the City Hall rotunda, holding signs that read, "Reform the force. Believe black women. Justice means action." Inside the chamber, council members whispered, texted, shifted nervously. One councilman who had previously voted no now stood. "I retract my opposition." The footage changed everything. So did her words. Another, a known moderate, followed. "My inbox is full of constituents demanding change. I can't ignore them anymore." In a quiet corner of the city, Commissioner Walsh watched the hearing. Footage alone in his office. He'd survived scandals before, but this one felt different. This time, The damage wasn't just political, it was moral. For the first time in his 30-year career, he asked himself a question. Have I been on the wrong side of history this whole time? He didn't have an answer, but his resignation letter was already drafted. That evening, as Elise returned home, she found a letter waiting in the mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note. You don't know me, but you saved me, because I was next. Elise folded the note, placed it inside a drawer beside her desk, and whispered, "Not anymore." The city didn't just react, it erupted. By sunrise the next day, every major network in the country was broadcasting clips of Elise's testimony. Her words echoed on breakfast shows, radio stations, podcasts, YouTube reaction videos. If this happened to me, how many others has it happened to without consequence? It was the kind of sentence that sticks to people's ribs, that gnaws at conscience. Hashtags exploded. Justice for Elise Fuertre. Cut down the rot. Black hair is not a weapon by noon. CNN aired the full footage during a primetime special titled Power, Policing, and the Hair That Sparked a Movement. Then came the warrants. The district attorney, under growing pressure and public scrutiny, held a press conference of her own. After reviewing the footage, the complaints, and Mrs. Montgomery's testimony, my office is formally charging Officer Derek Slater with assault under color of law, excessive use of force, civil rights violations, criminal harassment, battery, unlawful search and seizure. Reporters scrambled to confirm what they already sensed. Is he being arrested? The DA didn't hesitate. Yes. Officers are en route to detain Mr. Slater as we speak. Across town, Derek Slater sat slouched in a lazy boy, blinds drawn, half a bottle of whiskey on the floor. The news anchor's voice blared from the television. Breaking. Officer Slater to face 6 felony charges. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just whispered, "They really came for me." There was a knock at the door. Firm, rhythmic. Not the kind a neighbor makes. He stood slowly, opened the door. 3 officers stood there, 2 in uniform, 1 in plain. Clothes, no words, just cuffs. One officer recited the charges while the other secured his wrists behind his back. As they escorted him outside, camera flashes erupted like lightning. A neighbor across the street shouted, "Finally!" Another spit in the street. Slater flinched for the first time. That same day, Commissioner Walsh called a press conference. His statement was short, tired, final. After careful reflection, I am stepping down as Commissioner of Police. I failed to act swiftly. I failed to listen when it mattered. And for that, I take full responsibility. He didn't take questions. He simply removed the badge from his breast pocket, set it on the podium, and walked away. Outside City Hall, protesters flooded the streets. The plaza turned into a sea of signs. Reform now. We are all Elise. Respect our rights. Power to the people. Who's next if she wasn't? Safe? Elise watched from the mayor's office window. Not with joy, but with gravity. These aren't celebration signs, she murmured. They're warning signs. Marcus stood behind her, silent. Did I do the right thing? She asked, turning. You did the brave thing, he said softly. She looked out again. But brave doesn't always feel right. Not everyone was cheering. By nightfall, threats flooded Elise's inbox, anonymous emails, doctored images of her being attacked, a voicemail that simply said, tick, tock. The mayor's security detail doubled. Private security was added to their home. Plainclothes officers escorted Elise to and from her clinic. But the cost was deeper than fear. Nia, Elise's niece, called her crying. Auntie, I saw a video calling you a liar. They're saying you staged it. Elise reassured her. But something inside her broke, because now the lies weren't just targeting her. They were touching her family. At the next city council session, tensions boiled. Police union reps stormed out of the meeting when the DA announced that dozens of prior complaints against Slater would be re-reviewed, and that several supervisory officers may also face charges for suppression and collusion. Council members exchanged whispers. The message was clear. This wasn't going to stop at Slater. The walls were closing in. That night, Marcus sat alone in his study. His phone vibrated. A senior donor. Text. Pull back now. You've made your point. Don't. Sink the whole ship for one scandal. Another text from the governor's office. We need law and order. You're losing the middle. Then came the final message, from Elise. I know you're under pressure. Just promise me. You won't walk backwards now. He stared at that message for a long time. Then called his chief of staff. I want the full accountability package back on the floor. No amendments. No compromises. If I lose my seat over this, then so be it. By the end of the week, Elise's face was on every cover. Time. The Woman Who Wouldn't Break. The Atlantic. Hair. Power. Resistance. Essence. Black, brave, and unapologetically seen. She didn't seek this spotlight, but it found her. And in that spotlight, she made a decision. Elise scheduled one final interview, a televised address. She wore a simple suit, her hair still short, regrowing. She looked straight into the camera and said, I never wanted to be here. I wanted to be a therapist, a wife, a citizen, but the system made me a symbol. So now I'll be a signal that something is broken, and that we will fix it. 2 weeks had passed. The noise had not disappeared, but it had changed. What began as outrage and division had started to take on a quieter rhythm. Rebuilding. The press no longer camped outside their home. The hateful messages slowed. The city council had passed the full accountability package in a narrow but historic 5-4 vote. But Elise knew paper laws mean nothing without culture change, and culture only shifts on the ground. So that's where she went. She returned to Westbrook Heights, not for a press conference, not for a statement, just to walk, just like she had the day it all began. She wore her natural curls now, short, soft, shaped with intention. No more hiding, no more apologies. Children on porches waved. Neighbors opened their doors. One old man paused his rake and said, We were watching. We should have done more. You're doing it now, Elise said gently. She walked past Mrs. Wilkins's gate, the very spot where it had started. The old woman waved from her porch. You're still standing, Elise smiled. I'm still healing. Later that week, Elise attended her first neighborhood council meeting since the incident. This time, the folding chairs were full. Many who had never spoken now had something to say. A young black father raised his hand. I didn't trust any of this before. But now, I see what happens when we stay silent. I want to help. I want to be involved. A white woman, previously quiet, added, "My husband used to say these were isolated incidents. But when I saw what happened to you, I realized how much I didn't want to know." A pause. "Now I do." The following morning, Elise received an invitation from the local elementary school. "Would you come speak to the fifth graders? They've been asking questions about justice, and you've become part of their lesson plan." Elise accepted, without hesitation. Inside the small classroom, she was greeted by hand-drawn signs. "Welcome, Mrs. Montgomery. You are strong. Hair is history." One little girl with braids raised her hand. "Are you scared of the police now?" Elise paused. "Sometimes," she answered honestly. "But I'm more scared of what happens when good people stay quiet." A boy in the back said, "My uncle said you made our street safe." Elise smiled. "Your uncle helped. So did you. Every time you speak up, you change things." Outside the school, she noticed 2 officers posted near the gate. But they weren't standing stiff. They were kneeling with a group of children, helping them with sidewalk chalk drawings. One officer, a young black woman, caught her eye and waved. The chalk read, "Respect. Listen. Protect." Elise nodded. It wasn't enough, but it was a beginning. At the community center, a new flyer was posted. Civilian Oversight Board. Open meeting. Public invited. The board included a retired judge, a former community organizer, a mother who'd lost her son to police violence, and Vincent Tucker, the shop owner who had refused to delete his footage. He was the first to speak at the meeting. "This isn't about revenge. It's about repair." The room erupted in quiet applause. Back on Elise's street, kids started walking past her house after school. Not to gawk, not to whisper, but just to say hi. One girl knocked on her door and handed her a note card. "You're the reason I want to be a lawyer. I want to help people like you helped us." Elise framed it and placed it beside her license on the office wall. The oak tree on the corner, the one where Elise had once been pinned, humiliated, silenced, now had a different presence. A local artist had woven strands of ribbon through its branches, each bearing names of victims from across the country. At the center, a small metal wind chime dangled. Its tone was soft, but persistent, a symbol of loss, of dignity, of voices that would never be cut again. Marcus joined her one evening as she watered the plants. He looked at her hair, which had grown just enough to begin shaping itself. "You never let it define you," he said. Elise smiled. "No, but I reclaimed it anyway." He stepped closer. "You did more than reclaim it. You made the whole city see what they'd rather forget." She looked up at the stars breaking through the twilight. "Now we show them how to remember." The sun had just begun to rise when Elise sat at her desk. Steam rose from a cup of tea beside her. The house was still. Marcus was asleep. The city, for once, quiet. She opened a fresh page in her journal, then turned instead to a sheet of heavy, cream stationery. At the top, she wrote, "Dear Nia," and then paused. This wasn't just a letter. It was a legacy. "You asked me once, years ago, why do black women have to be strong all the time? I didn't have the words back then. I think I do now. We aren't born strong. We become strong because we are never allowed to be soft, because we walk into rooms that weren't built for us, because our dignity is mistaken for defiance. Because silence feels like safety, and safety is always conditional. Elise paused, her hand trembling slightly. But the words kept flowing. That day on the sidewalk, when the officer stopped me, I wasn't strong because I felt brave. I was strong because I was afraid. I thought of you. I thought of your hands in my hair when you were little, asking me to teach you how to braid. I thought of the way you whispered, "Is it pretty enough?" after you finished. And I knew I couldn't let him take that from you. Her tea had gone cold. The room was silent, but the memory wasn't. She could still feel the weight of the knife, the snap of her braids falling, the heat of humiliation, and the sharpness of the choice she made to stay calm when her soul screamed. She continued, "I didn't fight back because I was weak. I didn't fight back because I knew the cameras were rolling. I knew my body could be used as a weapon against me. I knew my anger would be used to rewrite the story. So I gave them nothing. No excuse. No justification. Just the truth, as raw and silent as the tears I refused to let fall. That silence, that was power. Because power isn't always loud. It's not always visible. Sometimes it's the ability to hold your ground when everything in you wants to collapse. Sometimes it's knowing that the world is watching and choosing not to give it the version of you it expects. Elise stood and walked to the window. Outside, a black girl rode her bike past the house, hair bouncing, braids flying, unbothered, unapologetic. Elise smiled. Back at the desk, she continued, "You wanted to know why I didn't use my voice sooner, why I waited. Because some battles have to be built, not just fought. Because what I endured would be forgotten in a week if I screamed into a void. But if I spoke when they were ready to listen, if I spoke when the world couldn't look away, then I wouldn't just have their ears, I'd have their conscience. You're growing up in a world that will still try to reduce you to your body, to your tone, to your skin, to your hair. Let them try, and then prove them wrong, not with rage, but with brilliance. Don't give away your joy to the people who are too broken to see it. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. And when the time comes, don't just survive, lead." She signed the letter slowly, deliberately. "With all my love, your Aunt Elise." Then she folded it, sealed it, tied it with a lavender ribbon, the same color Nia wore at graduation. She left it on the nightstand for Marcus to mail in the morning. Then she sat back and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, she felt whole. That evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Nia received the letter. She read it once, then again, and on the third read, she cried. Not because it was sad, but because it named something she hadn't known how to say. That restraint is not weakness, that dignity is not silence, and that strength is what you hold, not what you show. She folded the letter, slid it into her journal, and wrote underneath it, "This isn't just her story. It's mine too. And one day, I'll tell it." A soft breeze swept through the trees. It rustled the new leaves on the oak tree at the corner of Oakwood Drive, the same one Elise had once been pinned against. Now it held something new, a wind chime, delicate, silver, strung with small dog, tags, and metal-shaped beads, a gift from children on the block, who now called her Ms. Elise. When the wind moved, it made a sound like memory mixed with hope. Elise stood beneath the tree, alone. No cameras, no reporters, just morning light. She touched her hair, now fully regrown, shaped into a soft crown of curls. Not the braids they took, but the hair she chose. The hair that grew back on her terms. She walked slowly past Vincent Tucker's store. He was sweeping the sidewalk, as always. "You still out here making the city better?" he joked. "Only on Tuesdays," Elise smiled. Inside, on a shelf near the counter, sat a framed photo of the Civilian Oversight Board's first meeting. She was in the center. Vincent had placed a sticky note above it. "Real change lives here." At the community center, Elise dropped off flyers for a new mental health program, free trauma counseling, weekly support groups, open to anyone, no questions asked. She'd finally reopened her private practice, but had made space in her schedule for the unseen and unheard. Those who didn't have a mayor in their corner. Those who never got headlines. Those who needed someone who understood the silence after the sirens fade. Later that afternoon, Elise walked the full stretch of her old route from the pharmacy to her home. People waved, some smiled, some looked away, but with respect now, not avoidance. The sidewalk didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like hers again. She passed the school where she had spoken. Children were outside doing art on the pavement. One girl, the same fifth grader who had asked if Elise was scared, ran up and hugged her waist without warning. "You look so pretty now," she whispered. "Like a queen." Elise knelt, holding back tears. "No," she whispered. "I look like me." At home, Marcus was in the backyard, tending to a small garden they had planted together. It was new. Nothing had bloomed yet. Just potential. He looked up and smiled. "City Council just voted to make the Oversight Board permanent," he said, wiping his hands. "And guess who's getting asked to be interim commissioner?" Elise raised an eyebrow. "You?" "No. Reynolds. And he wants you to help lead training." Elise smirked. "Of course he does." They stood in the sunlight, just breathing. "You changed everything," Marcus said. "No," Elise replied. "We changed enough for now." Then she added, "But this is just the start." That evening, Elise returned to the oak tree once more. She carried something in her hands, a small box. Inside it, the braids Officer Slater had cut, carefully collected, stored, preserved, not as trophies, but as evidence of survival. She stood under the tree, opened the box, and one by one released them to the wind. The breeze carried them gently into the grass, into the sky, into the new world she helped shape. Then she sat on the bench beneath the tree, watching, listening, thinking. She had never shouted, never retaliated, never burned it all down, but still, she changed everything. Down the street, a patrol car rolled by slowly. But this time, it stopped and waved. A black woman stepped out in uniform, Officer Tiana Wilkins, the granddaughter of the neighbor who once recorded everything. She crossed the street, hands behind her back, then presented Elise with a folded note. "Thought you might. Like this," she said. "It's from the new recruits. They just graduated." Inside the note was a simple message. "Thank you for being who you were, so we could become who we are." As the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, Elise sat quietly. No applause, no headlines, just wind in the chimes, braids in the grass, and peace in her chest. She hadn't just survived. She hadn't just fought. She had refused to become the monster they expected, and in doing so, became the hero they didn't deserve, but desperately needed.